1. A few years ago, I worked for a furniture company. We were entirely online based, meaning only beds and sofas, and had just begun to move towards a made-to-order business model. This increased our product lead time significantly, as it took our suppliers about 3 to 5 weeks to build and upholster a sofa from the time we put in the order. The reason for moving to made-to-order was so the customer could choose between different fabrics for the furniture. We had a list of 100 plus fabrics that we could use, but often that wasn't enough for people. So we also offered a customer's own fabric, COF service, for when someone wanted to order a 2-seater sofa, upholstered in cartoon dicks and balls. This actually happened once, on a $1,000 sofa. For COF orders, the lead time didn't start until the day we received the fabric, and added an extra 2 weeks to production, so 5 to 7 weeks. COF also came with a long list of terms and conditions, including full payment up front, and only a 50% refund, and fabric not returned, if the order was cancelled anytime before delivery. One of my jobs was to take orders from interior designers. Most were professional and great to deal with. However, others were super needy, demanded constant updates, trade discounts, and often wanted their furniture delivered yesterday, as they always seemed to be working to a tight deadline, and couldn't grasp the concept of a lead time. One of my customers was a junior interior designer, Jude, at a medium-sized interior design firm with around 10 staff. She was very friendly, we got along really well, and had a good working relationship. On the other hand, her managing director, Maddie, was a complete bitch. She was constantly complaining about our lead times, the quality of our products, and anything she could think of. Jude always complained about being overworked by her, and she treated her staff like rubbish. Despite constantly complaining about us, Maddie continued to use us, and by what Jude said, we were one of their preferred suppliers. Jude emailed on 1st of June asking for a quote for a COF order of 9 sofas, about $15,000 worth. I emailed her the terms and conditions and reminded her that because it was her own fabric, the order would have a lead time of 5 to 7 weeks. And because it was such a large order, it would most likely be delivered towards the end of that time. She said that was pushing it a bit tight with her deadlines, but she'd be in touch. Later in the day, I got a call from Maddie. Maddie, we're going ahead with the order, but you'll have to make it faster. We need it in 6 weeks by 12th of July for the opening of a new hotel. Me, that's great, but we can't guarantee it'll be ready in 6 weeks. Like I told Jude, it'll be 5 to 7 weeks, but likely closer to the 7-week end of the lead time, 19th of July. And it's 5 to 7 weeks from when we receive the fabric, not from when you pay. Instead of using your own fabric, you could use one of the 100 plus fabric options and it'll be delivered in 3 to 5 weeks. Maddie, I can't possibly do that. This fabric is central to the whole design. I'll order the fabric from my supplier today, and we'll look forward to getting the sofas in 5 weeks. Me, but I just told you. Maddie, no, it's fine. We'll take that risk. Goodbye. I sent Maddie the full terms again, a written reminder of the risks, and payment details. We received the full payment for the order, and the fabric arrived with our suppliers a week later, 8th of June. I got a call from Jude. Jude, Maddie wants an update on the order? Me, the fabric arrived today, so it'll be 5 to 7 weeks from today, 12th of July to 26th of July. Jude, that's going to be tight with our opening on 12th of July. Me, as I told Maddie, it's super unlikely we can make that date, but obviously we'll do what we can. I'll let you know when we have an expected delivery date. A week later, 15th of June, we got an update from the supplier saying the order would be delivered on 24th of July. Maddie called as soon as I let them know. Maddie, this is completely unacceptable. We are one of your biggest customers, and this cannot be late. Me, it's not late. As I tried to make clear to you earlier, we were always unlikely to meet your deadline, and there's not much we can do. Maddie, you should be putting it up to the top of your order list. We are a priority. I could make a sofa in 2 days. Me, sorry, but that's not how it works. We can't intentionally delay other customers' orders. It's against our policy. Maddie started yelling unintelligibly and then hung up on me. The next day I got an email saying that she's looking for other suppliers.
If you don't hear from me by the end of today, cancel my order.
I didn't hear from her again that day, so the next morning I cancelled the order. Left a note for the supplier to send the fabric back to her if they hadn't already cut it, and issued a 50% refund. A few days later, 20th of June, Maddie called up outraged.
Maddie, what is my fabric doing in my design room? You're meant to be making my sofas.
Me, you asked me to cancel the order if I didn't hear from you. Luckily, the suppliers hadn't cut it yet, and we were able to send it back.
Maddie, but I still want the sofas. We'll have to delay the opening until the end of July. But we can manage that now.
Me, well, in that case, we'll need full payment again, and the lead time will start from the date we have received full payment and the fabric, so they should be ready by around the middle of August. If you get the payment and the fabric to us as soon as possible. She went absolutely crazy, telling me she'd ruin us and asking for manager's contact details. I passed on all the email evidence, which absolved me of the blame. She cut a deal with my manager that basically gave her another 25% of her refund back. And she proceeded with the order, to be handled directly by my manager, so I had nothing to do with it. I've never had to deal with Maddie again, but I spoke to June a few weeks later. She had spent days trying to find a supplier that would make her 9 sofas in her own material in 4 weeks. Apparently it wasn't possible, which is why she came back to us with her tail between her legs. As for the order, when the fabric got sent back, at some point the labels got mixed up, which resulted in the wrong fabric going onto the wrong sofas. Luckily, our supplier had photo evidence, so we didn't get the blame. But I was quite satisfied on hearing it set their project back about a month and a half. And we weren't at all to blame. Another positive to this story is we stopped doing COF orders. Our management team decided it was too much hassle for a limited reward. So this is the reason there will be no more penis sofas from that company. 2. Last summer I worked as a nanny for a family that had a very interesting living arrangement. The kids were a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and 3-year-old triplets, and not well behaved in the slightest. Some backstory. The mother and father had just moved the family in with her parents, and I was under the impression that they were in the process of building a house on some nearby land. The mother's job was an hour and a half to 2 hours commute, and she worked really long shifts, so I hardly saw her after she initially hired me. But she was my main source of contact through texting about caring for the kids, getting paid, things that the kids needed, things she needed me to do around the house, pertaining to the kids only, this is important, etc. The father worked, and often went on jobs that were several hours away too. The grandma was super sweet, and I honestly loved her, and felt bad that she had to put up with her monster of a husband. Grandma worked outside of the house too, and dear Lord, there was the grandfather. This man was the nastiest, most ill-tempered, cruel, and narcissistic person I may have ever met. Unfortunately, for me and the kids, he worked about half of his time from home, and would occasionally be around the house from 7 a.m. to noonish, when I would otherwise be alone with the kids. He would constantly embarrass the kids in front of me, particularly the oldest kid. He was ridiculously controlling and would impose weird rules on the kids, such as telling them they had to sit in a certain chair without making any noise for an arbitrary period of time. One of his favorite activities was forcing me into long, judgmental conversations in which he would ask me lots of questions and then try to make me look incompetent or stupid based on my answers. I'm talking like the stupidest, most irrelevant shit ever. Example convo. Grandfather. The lawn isn't getting enough water and you keep letting the kids run around in the yard and they're killing it. You need to leave the yard alone and let the sprinklers do their job. Me, okay, I'll keep the kids on the driveway. I know what you mean about the grass having a hard time in all this heat. My dad has been watering our yard every day too. Grandfather. Every day? Didn't you know we're in the middle of a drought? Your father is breaking insert law against watering your yard. Me. We have a well. So this fuckwad was the biggest pain in my ass, but I sucked it up and tried to just be overly polite and somewhat boring, because I was getting paid a lot to watch these kids and I didn't work for him. But I was still in his house. He would mostly bother me once or twice a day with some bullshit, and I would just ignore it as best as I could. So near the end of my time with them, the kitchen had become infested with those tiny black ants that get into everything. The grandfather had a bunch of people out to fix the problem, but nothing was working. And no one in the house was trying to keep things sanitary or clean in the slightest. I was at the sink, washing all of the kids' dishes like I always did. Anything the kids used, or I used to cook for them, was immediately washed, dried, and put away. Everything else I left for the other 4 adults who lived in this house, and who created those dishes. There was tons of crap in there, plus the ants. And I was really just trying to hurry up and do something else with the kids. The grandfather comes in and makes a beeline for me at the sink, and we have the following exchange. Grandfather:
"You need to make sure all these dishes are done. I'm very busy today, and I don't want to see anything in this sink when I come home."
Me: "Okay, sure." I'm completely over him at this point, so I finish up the kids' dishes and get them out of the way. The sink was full of disgusting dishes with food still on them, dirty pots and pans full of water, and the remains of a meal, and ants. Lots of ants. So I carefully forced each and every dirty, unrinsed, ant-covered dish into the dishwasher. It was like Jenga in there. I mean, I put every single dish in that dishwasher, whether it fit or not. Then the kids really needed me for some very important reason, and I just happened to forget to turn the dishwasher on before doing my actual job for the rest of the day. I managed to get out of there before he got home from work that day, and never had a single request from him again. I only wish I could have seen his face when he realized that his dishwasher was now also infested with ants. 3. To give some backstory, I'm a 19-year-old in community college, living in a small neighborhood in my parents' old small house. I mow my own lawn, which is reasonably small, because there is no homeowners association and I can't hire anyone to do it for me. Also, the sun and exercise is great. 3 of my neighbors are either elderly, don't have the time, or don't own mowers of their own, so I mow their reasonably small lawns for free at the same time I mow mine. I live in a very close neighborhood, so while I may do mowing, another neighbor may power wash driveways or some such. Let's just say I mow out of the goodness of my heart, and get compensated with a bottle of cold water afterward by 2 out of the 3. The third, however, is where the malicious compliance begins. The third neighbor is a very stubborn 40-something-year-old lady who, 1. owns her own mower, 2. can afford to hire someone to do it for her, 3. is very specific about how and when her lawn gets done, even though it's free. Reason 3 pisses me off the most, honestly, because she does not let me use my mower or fix hers. Seriously, it's like she's punishing me for volunteering to help her. And this mower is a piece of shit. The blades are dull, and she doesn't let me sharpen them. It's clogged full of old grass. She doesn't let me clean it. And yet every time I ask if I can tidy it up, she snaps,
"Quit wasting time and just get the job done."
She is mean, entitled, and doesn't care that I do 4 lawns in one day. Even on days where I can't mow the lawn because I'm feeling under the weather, or I'm just too busy with school, she threatens to call the Homeowners Association, again we don't have one, and report me for running a business without a license, unless I get the lawn mowed. I'm pretty sure of 3 things. You don't need a license to mow a lawn, it's not a business since I don't ask for money or compensation, and that she doesn't have the number for the Homeowners Association. That doesn't exist. I honestly should have stopped volunteering to mow her lawn a long time ago, but I just never had the heart. Except for last week. It's July, rainy and very hot. And on the morning I was scheduled to mow, it poured like a son of a bitch. Now those of you who mow lawns know you can't, or rather shouldn't, mow your lawn directly after it rains for various reasons. And my neighborhood is pretty shaded, so it takes at least a day to dry up. So around 5 o'clock in the afternoon I'm just relaxing and enjoying the free time, when out of nowhere there is a frantic smashing of a fist on my door. I would call it pounding, but it honestly wasn't. Lo and behold, it's stubborn lady looking annoyed as ever. As soon as I crack my door, the yelling starts, and I'm almost blasted back as she tries to push my door open. I couldn't make out most of what she was saying, but I did hear the words lazy, brat, and millennial thrown in there. I'm pretty laid back and used to dealing with angry adults, so this doesn't irk me all that much. But when she pushed the door open, that started to piss me off. Then she started to talk in an understanding voice. Stubborn lady.
Why isn't my lawn mowed? I need it mowed right now.
Me, ma'am, it rained pretty heavily today. I can't Stubborn lady.
I don't give a rat's ass what the weather is like. You better get your fucking ass out there. I have company.
Me, ma'am, I'm not going to do your lawn. I didn't even mow my own today. Please stop harassing me. Stubborn lady.
If you don't mow the lawn right goddamn now, I will report you like I should have done a long time ago.
Now, while I could have argued, which I don't like to do, I had thought of a better plan. Me. All right, ma'am. May I at least use my mower? Stubborn lady.
No goddamn way, you snot-nosed kid. I want my lawn exactly the way I like it.
My plan was in action. So, grabbing her mower and seeing that her and her company's freshly rained-on fancy cars were all right on the edge of the lawn, I started to mow. I only got about halfway through before the mower completely shut down due to clogging and sheer dullness of the blade. But it all worked out. Later that day, after a nice shower and meal, I heard the reaction to my compliance, which was, to my amusement, the insane screaming and ranting about why the lawn was only half done, and every car was caked in mud and grass. I only got in trouble with her, as none of my neighbors liked her very much. And of course she threatened again to report me to the non-existent homeowners association. To which I said, go ahead, and then once and for all told her I refused to mow her lawn ever again. 4. I'm a clerk at a civil court in Brazil. Both my wife and I applied for a position in the same region through the same entrance examination. But since my grade was better than hers, I wound up getting the job before she got hers. The region comprises City A, larger and safer, and City B, smaller with a high crime rate, which are about 10 miles apart. I got the job at a civil court in City A, and I chose to work the last shift, 11 to 7. Other shifts are 9 to 5 and 10 to 6. Most clerks choose to work the first shift, and directors tend to value clerks who work the last shift. My office had 5 clerks in the first shift, 5 clerks in the last shift, and none in the 10 to 6. My director was a very stern man. Our bylaws allow for a few perks which he would often forsake due to what he claimed it was in the office's best interests. He would ask people not to take vacations. He would get mad at people calling sick with doctor's notes. We have 6 yearly full paid absences which he would not let us take. Even though we're allowed to clock up to 15 minutes late 5 times a month with no penalty, he would shame people for doing it, and order them to clock out late. He never really trained or assigned someone to train me, just started shoving tasks on me. He would order people to clock out and stay after hours so they wouldn't get comp hours. When I had my vasectomy and my doctor gave me 2 days off because of an issue, he called me to go to work the same day and threatened to write me up when I refused, heavily implying that I forged my doctor's note. I think you get the gist of it. What always baffled me is that myself, himself, and every worker in the office, and we had a lot of clerks there, was being paid by the state, yet he acted like he was paying us out of his own pocket and doing us a favor letting us work under him. He also had a reputation for his sternness among his peers. Most directors are pretty chill people, since they're basically glorified supervisors. Not this one. Whatever, I kept doing my work diligently. I've worked retail. Nothing scares me anymore. About 1 year later, my wife got the job at City B, and she could only do the 11 to 7 shift, because her department had very few people at that shift. She couldn't drive, is terrified of, and buses from my house or City A to City B are sparse, have lots of robbery reports, and are basically motorized horse wagons. None of her co-workers lived anywhere close to my house, or City A's courthouse, so basically, we could either waste a lot of money on Uber, or I had to leave her in City B and go back to City A, work 8 hours, go back to City B and then go back home, wasting a total of about 2.5 hours driving in the process, which is what we were doing for 2 months. Right up to the point when she nearly got mugged. Clerks are not allowed to stay in City B's courthouse building after 7, so she had to wait for me about 40 minutes in the street, where shit almost happened if it weren't for a late leaving police officer. After that happened, I absolutely had to change my working hours to an hour earlier, 10 to 6, so I could be there when she got out. I explained everything to my director and he scoffed, said it was not his problem, that is not in the office's best interests, that I changed my shift, even though there were 4 clerks aside from me working the same shift. 2 are usually what most departments get. He would have double, and apparently it wasn't enough. And none working the 10 to 6. So my wife started taking an Uber back home, which was a big financial hit on us. It ate about 1/3 of our income. My wife's director suggested I switched workplaces with another person from City B. So, provided that the court president approved, he always did, and that my director signed a document agreeing with the change, that person would then work at City A and I would work at City B. As luck would have it, one of my wife's co-workers had been trying to work at City A for 2 years, so I already had someone to switch places with. I talked about it with my director and, after 2 weeks postponing an answer, you guessed it, he told me it was not in the office's best interests. When I insisted, his reasoning was, you know how to work here, and a new person wouldn't know, so you absolutely need to stay here. Never mind that the new person was also a clerk at a civil court, so the work was basically the same. I asked him what the hell I was supposed to do since we were losing quite a lot of money, and he wouldn't allow me to either change my shift or my workplace, and he said, very sarcastically, that I could complain to the judge, and I was to stop bothering him with my personal drama. He knew my judge wouldn't even meet a newbie clerk, much less believe me. My wife relayed that info to her director and he was astonished. But he had an idea. Tell it to the judge, you say? So my wife's director explained everything to his course judge, who in turn had a long phone call with my course judge. She politely asked him to let me switch, and told him about my director's habit of ignoring our bylaws. The next day, the judge shows up in my department. My director, ironically, is late. Judge is asking the senior clerks questions about my director. Most of them try to avoid answering. He seems to understand everything. Director arrives, is all smiles when he sees the judge in our office instead of his own, and is greeted with a, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The room freezes. Judge rants for about 10 minutes about how employees should be free to do what our bylaws allow, and that if my director was so damn adamant about not signing the document for my switching, he would do it himself while signing my director's demotion. He wasn't supposed to stop people from doing what is specifically allowed in our bylaws, and he has been many a time ordered to, I quote, "Stop treating court clerks as goddamn retail clerks." Some people were really fed up with my director, and this public ass-chewing finally grew a spine on them, because they started telling the judge things he did. Most quoted his, "is in the office's best interests" policy, and the judge got livid after hearing about it for the 3rd time. "You don't get to decide what's better for the office. I get to decide what's better for the office because it's my office, and every single one of you works under my authority," he yelled, his red face a few inches from my director's face. Good. Now we have a power tripper publicly power tripping a power tripper. After some more yelling, the judge leaves. My director is floored. He basically sits on his chair and glares at me. I can see it in his eyes. He will get back at me hard. There's indistinct chatter among the clerks about filing a formal complaint. The judge, however, comes back after about 10 minutes with a sheet of paper in hand and walks in my direction. If I weren't a public worker, I would think I was about to be fired. He bluntly asks me, "Are you sure you want to go to City B?" I can only nod. He has a very powerful presence. I later learned that he used to work in the army. He gives me the paper. It's the document I needed a signature from my director, signed by the judge himself. It's already signed by my wife's director and the person who would switch with me. It's only missing my signature. Judge says, "Sign it, and take the rest of the day off as paid leave." You're to work in City B as of tomorrow. I stammer. But wasn't I supposed to wait for the court president's approval? And he glares at me. I am a judge. If I say go, you go. You don't have to say it twice, my lord, my liege, my demigod. I thank him profusely, say my goodbyes to my co-workers, and I go to my director. I look him dead in the eye. You were right. The complaint thing did work to my best interests. His face contorts in what some subreddits would call a cat butt face. The next day, I started working at City B's court, under what's probably the best director one could ever ask for, with the blessing of working with my wife. We're allowed to as long as we have the same job. My current director is basically the antithesis of my previous one. Very reasonable and non-confrontational. A former co-worker kept me informed of the fallout. He told me that 5 other people, himself included, requested to switch to other courts the following days, and the director was forced to sign for them all. No immediate switching like mine, though. Since director is an appointed position by the court's judge, he was demoted to chief clerk by the end of that week, and the former chief clerk, a lovely woman, got his job. He tried to flaunt power at the newcomers, and his new director put an end to it very quickly by giving him a 30-day suspension. 5. So I was working on a project in another country for my company. I was there as part of the party that were fixing a major fuck-up that would have cost the company a substantial sum, likely fatal for the company. The fuck-up was so bad that a few of us ended up working every day of the week, for 12 hours more or less, for 4 months. Point 1. Now, as everyone else was contracting, they made bank. And it was all right. I, however, was on salary. Were I working minimum wage with overtime, I would have made at least twice what I actually had been. Point 2. Also, as I was the only non-C-level employee on site throughout the project, I had both critical responsibilities and no authority to make critical decisions. Point 3. Also, as my direct reports kept rotating out, I get stuck with this random assortment of jobs ranging from sweeping the floor, breaking concrete, to programming systems, managing network, running electric, fabricating hardware, painting walls, and a bunch of shit in between. Point 4. All of them needed me for some shit every day, even when contractors were specifically given days off. I remember making an improvised workshop in a hotel meeting room, and seeing a big group of them in the pool. Point 5. By month 2.5, I'm wearing thin, and have enough high ground to request a promotion, a raise, and a bonus. A big one on all accounts. I talked to my actual supervisor back home, and they agree I deserve it, as does their boss, but they're being stripped of authority within the organization. I message my supervisor of the day to set a meeting, and get ignored. So do the other messages on apps that confirm that the recipient is reading the messages. Then I try HR, but they're in another country, so I go straight to the CEO, looping them into the one-sided thread. Nada. This leads me to one dreary day in a hot and dirty construction site, where I receive the group message that states only one C-level, one shit-for-brains contractor, and one great but way overworked contractor are allowed to stop local workers from doing their jobs. I am already working through lunch as we're in some emergency mode with my part of the project, when a local crew lead I have never met tells me that they need me to move all the computers I'm setting up out of the way so they can put glorified posters on the wall. Fuck it. I text the 3 people with the authority to stop them, as my project has priority. No response for 20 minutes. Still nothing after that. But I can't tell the local crew to move on, so I maliciously comply and move all the PCs and wrap them in their cables in the middle of the rooms like hostages. Lunchtime. I get a call in 30 minutes that I ignore. Texts flood in from the people that ignored my requests and other C-levels. Panicked about what happened. They need the issue resolved. And a rundown on what happened so that they know who to fire. I tell them I'm on lunch. I'll have one of the good contractors get everything in order, and I'll meet them in the parking lot, our only real break area, in an hour. They confirm. I meet them at the allotted time, frazzled but collected, and give them the rundown on why this fire and all the other previous fires not mentioned in this post keep happening. I inform them that I want to see this project through, but I can no longer justify it to myself to stay on the project, so I would need their help with that. Remember, I was in a critical role. I was the only person in the nearest 6 countries who could run some of these systems. As the CEO was right there, he signed off on a bonus, a raise, and a symbolic promotion. Fuck it. He also sees that I need some time off, and tells me to take the rest of the day off while he figures something out. When I woke up from my nap, I have a confirmation of a 10k raise, a 30k bonus, and 2 tickets to a tropical getaway in a 5-star resort on a tiny island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. We did finish what we set out to do, and it came out great. I'm good with all the players mentioned. It was just a stupidly stressful project for everyone involved. 6. About 10 years ago, I worked for a national manufacturing company that made building products. At a plant that made low-pressure laminate boards of all kinds of thicknesses, textures, and designs, colors, patterns, etc. Due to the vast array of products running through the 3 short-cycle laminating lines, the lines were controlled and maintained via various primary logic controllers, PLCs. 60 minutes of downtime on a line meant $10,000 lost production. Now, I was on call at this plant 24/7, by myself for 5 years, with a crew of over 100 plant operators who had been told to call me 24/7 if anything went wrong on the computers or those goddamn zebra label printers that print these stickers for each pack of board. Which meant I was pretty time poor during the day, so started working later and later to work on projects just to keep up. I was young and this was the first in-charge role I'd had, so I was keen to prove myself. One of these projects ended up being an upgrade of the workstations that the electrical engineer and shift electricians used to program changes into the PLC logic itself when there were electrical or mechanical issues that the lines couldn't cope with. These machines were all running software like Rockwell RS Logics and Siemens PLC interfaces. These software packages back then happened to be so old, like the PLCs and machinery on the lines itself, that the software licenses still ran on 3.5-inch floppy disks. The software dongles were loaded to each machine using floppy. In some cases, they could only be activated once. As part of this project, I encountered a critical workstation that had a dead floppy disk drive. This highlighted how dangerous this current method was, as a dead floppy disk could lose a $20,000 license, paid to replace each time, as I was warned early on. Before activating, so I quickly used a freeware utility to take a disk image of each floppy drive itself and store them as a backup on my server and tapes. During this, I also learned I could use this method to, illegally, clone the licenses to multiple machines. Didn't do so, but I proved it could be done in an emergency. Where I screwed up was telling the electrical engineer how smart I was to avoid a future disaster, who then relayed this to his manager, the maintenance supervisor Bill. Bill was an old-school electrician who didn't mind making shortcuts if it got the job done, and considered himself my manager because IT should be treated like the other trades. Never mind I reported to the plant accountant locally, but technically was an IT department employee out of head office. So Bill, having heard from the electrical engineer what I could now do, decides during this upgrade project, and without telling me, that he didn't need to purchase new licenses for the PLC packages. An easy 15-minute online process of providing company details and a purchase order number. Because I could just clone them and save us this money. 3 machines, $60,000. So he would have looked great to the plant manager. Which he then tells me late on Thursday night as I'm installing the PLC software on the new machine, having deactivated the old license on the old machine. I had a network backup which he didn't know about, and about to license the new machine. What ensued is your typical, I'm older and wiser than you, so just do your job, intergenerational argument where both parties believed they were right and neither was backing down. After half an hour of me giving up trying to explain why this was illegal, unethical, and not going to happen, Bill finally had enough of my insubordination and ordered me to go home to think about whether I wanted a future in his department. Again, not my manager, or even indirect manager. I refused, knowing that if there was an issue with the line before I finished the migration, the electricians could not have fixed it, and the line would be down at a significant cost. But Bill was the senior manager on site, and exercised his authority to kick me off the site until the next morning. But not before I went to my office, documented everything, and sent it to my manager, CC the HR rep, to return at 9 a.m. I know why Bill wanted me off-site. He thought he could figure out where the backups were stored and install the license himself. A secure, hidden share meant that he could not. I left my mobile phone off for the first night in years, considering I was barred from site, so couldn't attend any issues anyway and slept like a log. At 9 a.m. I walked into the management team in the boardroom, and the plant manager running for me like I had the ball in a World Cup rugby game. "Where the hell have you been and why was your fucking phone off?" I was barred from site until 9 a.m, so changed my voicemail to contact the after-hours team, and turned it off so it rang to voicemail immediately.
"Beeline has been down since you left. We are down over $100,000 from forecast."
I'm sorry to hear that, but like I said, I was barred from site by Bill. I notified the plant accountant and HR rep via email last night about this.
"Go get Beeline back up now."
I can't. Bill didn't buy new licenses for the line, so the new machine won't run, and the old license has been deactivated.
He says you can copy them. Get the line back up, and we'll get it later.
I need that request in writing. What you're asking me to do is illegal and in breach of company policies, so I need it to be recorded. The plant manager went from red-faced to white-faced pretty quickly, and then returned to the boardroom to order Bill to order licenses ASAP. An audit could be initiated by myself, IT, or the vendor at any time, and penalties were known to be severe. Half an hour later, the workstation was licensed, running, and the line humming along to the despair of the plant operators, enjoying an extended smoko. Site policies were also changed so that only the plant manager and HR rep could kick someone off site, and Bill was reminded just who my manager was. I also learned to keep any borderline illegal and dodgy tricks I had to myself, and only use them to save my ass if absolutely needed. 7. I worked minimum wage as a retail everything. I mean, I was half manager, half cashier floor worker, half inventory. What I'm trying to say is I did too many things. But this was a small business mom and pop style shop. There were only 3 of us at a time running the whole operation. These were family friends. I felt I had a responsibility to this family. Minimum wage wasn't enough for a stranger, but it was enough for me, for a while. After 3 years, I had tripled their business profits. I know this because one of my many tasks involved balancing the books. I knew exactly what our sales numbers were. I knew our profit margins. I knew what our inventory cost. I knew our landlord on a first-name basis, and I knew what bills we paid. I was good at my job. This store was like my family, and I made them proud. My wage had not increased in those 3 years, but looking at the numbers, I thought now was a good time to bring it up, so I did. It was November, entering December. I asked for $1 more, and my boss agreed. That December, my boss forgot to pay me. I had nothing to cover my Christmas holiday. The next month, he didn't mention it at all when I returned to work after the holiday. I had to remind him that he was nearly 7 weeks overdue. When he finally paid me, he did not include the raise we had agreed upon. So I brought it up again to ask for clarification. He sat me down in the back room and told me he couldn't believe how demanding I was, that in all his years he'd never seen someone act so rude and disrespectful to their elders. If we were strangers, I'd have left on the spot, but we were family. I was in tears. But I was also very, very angry. He wanted to go on his own holiday. He wanted to go for 3 weeks. But to teach me a lesson in respect, he also wanted to slash my hours. What's a store owner to do? He hired a new employee to cover the hours he was cutting from my schedule. He made me train the new girl for him to teach me respect. After this training period, my shifts went from 4 days a week to 1 day a week. This way he could give me a decent raise on paper, but pay me a quarter of what he did before. and his new employee accepted the lowest minimum wage. I didn't object. As a last-ditch effort to save the business, I offered to spread my shift out and come in for 1 hour at the end of each day to check the new employee's numbers, but he refused. He wanted me to feel bad. I felt terrible. For my boss, as hard as I tried, the new employee had never understood numbers. I had tried and failed to teach her how to calculate her sales numbers at the end of each shift. This poor girl was straight out of high school and had too many other subjects to think about. If we'd had more time for training, she probably would have learned it, but my boss cut my hours too short for me to go in depth about it, and who was I to argue with his schedule? That's why, when he went on holiday, and I couldn't be around to check this girl's work during the rest of the week, the business lost money. On the days I wasn't scheduled to work, thousands of dollars in sales went unaccounted for. Hundreds of dollars of cash were miscounted. Numbers were typed incorrectly into our computer system, rendering our inventory counts useless. After 3 weeks, he returned to an absolute mathematical nightmare. The sales numbers for my 3 days of work were perfectly accounted for, and 3 times higher than what our system reported we sold the rest of the week. Although who knows what the real numbers were. I think this made him angry. He really wanted to teach me a lesson in humility. In my last full shift, a customer tried to return something large, and I told them our store policy to the letter. Only my boss had the power to return that item, to make sure it would be returned properly. I did write a note on their receipt that they had tried to return it to me, but I was following store policy and leaving it for my boss to handle when he returned from his holiday. Apparently, according to the angry reviews left on our social media, he refused to accept the return and told the customer she was a stupid idiot for believing me. In my next scheduled shift, I asked him point blank if the review was true, and he laughed about it. He told me he was just showing us all who's boss. He admitted to the whole thing. He also mentioned he was giving me more hours as a reward for all my hard work. He wanted me to come in every day from now on to review all the numbers. I came clean. He'd given me a lot of time off in the past few weeks, and during that time I'd found a new job. I made it clear also that I had never once disobeyed his instructions or broken store policy. Every action I'd taken had left a paper trail. However, he had broken every single agreement he'd made with me. My payday dates, my wages, my scheduled hours. Things that could be proven by my expert paper trail to our Ministry of Labor. And his behavior and comments around customers were posted on every social media review which he admitted to. So I knew exactly what he thought of me. I was only there to hand over the keys to the store. He cried. He couldn't look me in the eyes. Part of me is sad because for a long time we were family. Since my departure, reviews of my old family-run shop have absolutely tanked. Meanwhile, my new job is incredibly wholesome, my hours are solid, my benefits are excellent, and my rates are triple what I made before. And I wouldn't be here if I hadn't followed instructions to the letter. I've learned so much about respect. 8. Here's one from about 10 years ago, back in my days in the Air Force. I was just an observer, but knew all the players and was good friends with the hero of the story, Senior Airman Doc. For some background, Senior Airman Doc was a 22-year-old kid from Georgia who was pulling duty as a safety range goon. On the range, nobody outranks the RSO, and an RSO has the authority to do whatever is necessary, including physically interacting with a shooter, to ensure the safety of everyone out there. Being he was from Georgia, he was very much a yes sir, no sir man, and had issues with the concept of positional authority, and when officers came out, he'd oftentimes have trouble remembering his position outranked their rank and grade. After a few weeks of having trouble exerting his authority, his first sergeant told him something along the lines of, "I don't give a damn who they are, if someone puts you or others at risk, you lay their asses out." Now on to the malicious compliance. It's a hot July day and 2 squadrons are out doing their annual qualifying on the M16A2. One is a fighter squadron. The other is the engineering squadron I was stationed with. Senior Airman Doc was the RSO of the day. and there were several other range masters out too. The officers of the fighter squadron were up first. Now mind you, these guys are pilots. They'll likely never have to actually use a rifle in combat, and God help us if they do, because they're like dustbusters. They suck and are worthless at what they're doing. First group goes up. Pow pow pow, done, no issues. Second group of officers goes up, and within moments, one of the range masters calls the line cold because the captain had unsafed his weapon before being given the order to do so. Senior Airman Doc goes up and addresses him. Senior Airman Doc: Sir, you are to follow the orders of the range masters and myself at all times. Do not unsafe your weapon before being told to do so. Do you understand? Captain Hotshot: Sorry about that. Won't happen again. Doc calls the range hot again. Everyone readies their weapons, and Hotshot again unsafes his weapon before the order is given. The range master who's supervising this end of the firing line calls the range cold and waves. Senior Airman Doc goes over. Senior Airman Doc: Sir, if you do that again, you will not be allowed to qualify, and I will be forced to file a formal report with your squadron safety officer. Captain Hotshot: Sorry again. I'm just wanting to get this done with. At this moment, everything seems good, until Hotshot Muzzle sweeps Doc and another pilot on the line. Doc springs into action and stomps Captain Hotshot's hand. At the same time, kicks him in the face. Senior Airman Doc: You just aimed a loaded weapon at me and one of your fucking teammates, sir. You're a goddamn safety hazard, sir. You're going to kill someone, sir. Now get off my line before I beat your ass, sir. Farther down the line was the squadron commander, a lieutenant colonel. He pops up, hands his rifle to the range master who's watching his group, and trots down to see what the hell is going on. He sees one of his officers with a bloody face and cradling his right hand, with an airman standing over him. Screaming, the lieutenant who got muzzle swept, as well as myself and 2 other CE officers, let the colonel know what had happened. Colonel gets pissed, orders the captain off the line with a "I will see you in my office once we're done here." Fast forward 3 weeks. I run into Doc at the chow hall, ask him about what had happened. Basically, the squadron commander, Doc's squadron commander, Doc's first sergeant, and the captain who got kicked all had a good powwow. First sergeant was chewed out for giving unclear directives to a subordinate. But nothing more occurred. Captain Hotshot was down-checked as non-deployable because he had a broken nose which took him off of flight status. They covered the safety issue. Senior Airman Doc was awarded the Air Force Achievement Medal for outstanding achievement in performance of his duties as RSO, ensuring the maximum compliance with all range safety rules, etc., etc. 9. I used to serve in the United States Air Force working in ground transportation. To close the gap, I won't use any military acronyms or ranks. This duel takes place when I worked nights as a dispatcher. My primary job was to support base operations manpower and vehicles. Apart from that was renting vehicles to flight crews. We had about 30 vehicles we could give air crews to rent. There is an online form you can fill out or call us directly. This lets you see what we have available. However, sometimes we don't have any vehicles for them to use, and they just have to deal with being dropped off and picked up. Basically, they can't travel around the city on the government's dime. It's a normal, quiet night like most. I get a call giving me information on a plane about to land. Okay, no problem. I dispatch a driver and the proper vehicle to pick them up. Instead of the driver taking them directly to the hotel, he comes back to the shop. I am confused, as it's made clear we have nothing to lend the crew, and they have to be taken to the hotel directly. In comes, let's call him Jim. Now, Jim has a rank as high as you could consider someone of upper management, 1 rank from being a general. He walks up to me with an angry look demanding that he receive a vehicle for him and his crew. I ask to see his request form. Jim looks at me as if I have just insulted his honor. "I don't need paperwork. You will give me what I want or there will be problems." I just want to make something clear. Most people I run into are very, very civil. Sometimes, though, you get Jim. Jim likes to use his position to get what he wants and threaten others if he doesn't. Okay, Jim, this isn't how it works. There are procedures and regulations I have to abide by. If you don't have the request, then I can't help you. He snorts, literally snorts, his nose puckers up, and I thought he was going to shoot snot at me. "Give me the paperwork to fill out then, damn it." Jim at this point is trying to posture over me as much as he can to make himself appear more threatening. I hand him the paperwork and watch him fill it out. As soon as he hands it back to me without missing a beat, I look at him and say, "I'm sorry, sir, but there aren't any vehicles at this time to give you. If you don't mind, I can get my guy to take you to your hotel, and we will pick you up tomorrow morning." Honestly, my smile at this point was clearly one of satisfaction, and I was holding back laughter. Took this guy 10 minutes to fill the paperwork out. At this point, he is furious. He starts yelling and screaming at me at the top of his lungs. All the guys get out of their seats to come into dispatch area, but I wave them back into the lounge. I let him yell for a solid 15 minutes. I was honestly impressed. After he calms down a bit, he leans over the counter, might be about 6 inches between us, and says, "Your mouth just wrote a check your rank can't cash." Silence just fills the room. After a few moments I say, "Did you just reference Top Gun?" He takes a step back, and I'm not sure what was going through his head, but I think he had a lot of misfires at the moment. He begins to start up again, telling me that I'm just an airman, and I have to respect the chain of command, and that if he gives me an order, I have to obey. I'm not going to muck up the story with explanations about the chain of command. At this point, I've had enough. I stood up. "Sir, I understand your frustration, but I run this shop. I am the dispatcher, and what I say goes. I have told you we can't give you a vehicle and stated the alternatives. If you continue to cause me problems, I will call the police, who will be happy to escort you from this building. And tomorrow you can explain to the boss why you felt the need to scream and shout for the sake of a vehicle. This is what's going to happen. You are going to get onto that bus, and one of my guys will take you and what is very obviously a tired crew to the hotel. What is it going to be?" He was stunned and his posture changed instantly. He looks back at the crew, who at this point have turned their heads away as if pretending not to hear. I sit back down in front of the computer, slide the paperwork and information he gave me. I looked down at my rank and back at him and said, "Check cashed." 10. I work as an amateur dance teacher on the side of my studies, and in that line of work, I've met some wonderfully motivated students, whom I've helped out to the best of my abilities to get started on their competing career, but also quite a few nutcases. The worst one was a woman who absolutely insisted she was an extremely talented dancer, being held back by her partners, and refused to put in any work whatsoever whenever practice included anything she didn't consider worth her time, such as basic technique, improving rhythmicality, or partnering skills. After all, she was already way better than her partner, so why bother? In reality, though, she was barely better than beginner level despite years of practice, and definitely did not have any talent whatsoever. And that's okay. You don't need to be great at something to do it for fun, and I'll gladly teach anyone interested in learning without caring the slightest bit about whether they are good at it or not, because there's no feeling that beats seeing one of your students improve. Now, this woman was always trying to guilt-trip me into giving her favored treatment, claiming I was the reason she didn't improve faster, that I didn't give her enough lessons, that I failed at teaching her partner to be worthy of her, and even claimed that I should become her dance partner because she had enormous potential for growth and was already at almost the same level as I was. Not true, of course. Someone on a beginner level is not quite comparable to someone trying to get their foothold in semi-professional events. I, of course, did not appreciate her behavior one bit, because she always had this condescending tone, as if she considered herself to be the one in charge during my classes or lessons. Never mind the fact that someone trash-talking their own practice partner is just about the most detestable person I can imagine. You're supposed to work with, not against each other. I myself am not a big fan of the customer is always right policy, but will admit there's some truth to it. So despite feeling like it, I did not straight up ban her from attending my classes. Instead, I waited for her to begin one more of her rants about her own excellency. I just waited for her to finish, and then cue some malicious compliance. Me. "You know, you're right. I have not been able to improve you at the same rate as my other students, and I do feel bad about it." Her, "Yeah, So how about we keep some extra lessons on Sunday? I can't really afford to pay, but it's about improving your students, not pay, right? Technically correct. I do give generous discounts to some of my students I know have low income, but put in a lot of work, and love the sport. She's neither low income or a hard worker, though. Me, no, I don't think that would help. I have come to believe that my teaching methods just aren't suitable for you personally. No amount of lessons from me could make a difference. I think the best way would be for us to part ways. You should find yourself a teacher that fits you. With that, let's end today's lesson early. You won't have to pay for it. Her, but... Me? No. I know you think you've enjoyed your practice here, and wouldn't want to leave it behind. And as you said, you have your goals set high, so you should just find yourself a professional teacher. I'm just an amateur after all. Thank you for your time. I wish you good luck in your future endeavors. After that, she was quite visibly in shock and couldn't gather herself to properly answer. So I simply turned to the couple who I had the next lesson with, and told them we could start early, thus taking away any chance she had at disputing it then and there, knowing full well her pride would not allow her to beg me to turn my decision around later on. Alas, I have not seen her since, which I am very grateful for. I absolutely hated every minute I had to spend in her presence. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to the Revenge is Ice Cream Archives number 4. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories. Well, as this was originally recorded, we were about halfway through March in 2023. The world seems to descend ever into chaos, and everything we do to dig ourselves out of the hole seems to make no damn difference. But at least we have entertainment. And snacks. Snacks are good. I think I'm going to go have some chocolate. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.